As small as it was compared to the vast empire of the Muslims that once spread across Iberia, the Nasrid kingdom had become a sanctuary for scholars, visionaries, and those holding on to the dream of a unified Islamic rule. Resilience ran its walls, and its people were bonded by hope, even as the Christian forces of Castile and Aragon drew tighter. But it is then that, at the feverish peak of Reconquista, Granada shouldered alone, standing at the last bastion of a previous age. As Ferdinand and Isabella opposed them, Nasrids had to resist, submit, or be destroyed. This is the final stand of Granada, a tale of ambition, betrayal, and heartbreak that would forever change the course of history. It is the year 1492, and everything hangs in the balance about the fate of Al-Andalus. How did this 1,000-year-old dream unravel? Step into the final chapter of Muslim rule in Iberia. The tides of Iberian politics had irrevocably shifted, with the Christian Reconquista gaining momentum. The marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella in 1469 united the crowns of Castile and Aragon to form an irresistible partnership and, for the kingdoms of Christ, a single, invincible force. Whereas it would have been some fantasy or relic of past politics, a union of this nature presented resources, armies, and ambition all rolled together and granted unmatched power to these monarchs so that they could pursue the Reconquista in a more concerted manner. Their eyes were fixed on the jewel of Al-Andalus, Granada. Meanwhile, in Granada, the Nasrid kingdom was thus splintered with internal rivalries. His own position as Sultan was fought over by intense rivalry between his father, Muley Hassan, and his uncle, Al-Zagal. Such internecine infighting made the power of Granada weak in its defense, and it ended up vulnerable enough to the fiercest external threats. The atmosphere was that of suspicion, betrayal, and factionalism. Ferdinand and Isabella used the fragmentation for their advantage with military power, as well as by using diplomatic strategy. Their actions were well coordinated in attacking strategic Nasrid cities surrounding Granada. By systematically taking cities such as Malaga and Almeria, they blocked the supply lines of Granada and access to possible allies. The Christian king's approach was relentless. They ensured that Granada was blocked and starved into submission. The Granada siege was a culmination of several decades of focused effort. Encircling the city with their combined armies, Ferdinand and Isabella tightened the noose over the last remaining Muslim stronghold in Iberia. It was an impossible crossroads the Nasrids had reached by 1491, either to resist and perish or to surrender to save what was left of their people and culture. Ambition, conflict, and shifting loyalties paved the road to 1492. For Granada, it was the end of an era. For Ferdinand and Isabella, it would be the start of a united Spain. History would soon witness one of its most poignant and transforming moments, the fall of Granada. The story of centuries-long Reconquista is a very dramatic turning point in history. In the spring of 1491, Ferdinand and Isabella ordered their huge army to encircle Granada, one more bastion in Iberia that still sustained Muslim rule. Military precision, psychological warfare, and unyielding determination characterized how the Catholic monarchs approached the siege. No room to escape or pause. There were tens of thousands of Christian soldiers who built a fortified camp outside the walls of Granada. This camp was called Santa Fe and declared their intention to persist. The Catholic monarchs ordered the construction of a permanent city, a sign to the Nasrids that they would not back down until Granada fell. On the outskirts of the city, the fighting was very intense, and Ferdinand's men used it to destroy all access roads that led to Granada, along with any supply lines for food and other provisions which could be brought into the city. The two sieges also included constant bombardment by artillery on the city walls and psychological warfare. This is how the Catholic monarchs used their massive firepower and resources to put constant pressure on the defenders, which would break the defenders after a long time. They also spread rumors of impending destruction and total annihilation, aiming to sap the morale of Granada's citizens and defenders alike. The time of unimaginable hardship for people living in Granada was at this stage of the siege. The months went by and the supplies ran out. Hunger and disease spread within the city walls. People began to ration the meager food they had left, and desperation started creeping in. All these were just reminders outside Santa Fe that they were isolated and their defeat inevitable. The people of Granada had faced unbearable hardships but were tenacious. Although the defenses of the city combined with the defenders' determination had held out to this point, nothing could disguise the disparities in equipment and numbers. The heart of the fight was the besieged leader of Granada, Muhammad XII. Tragic, and yet so complex, he was pressed from within and without the city. His leadership came under contesting factions and was impoverished by his previous relations with Ferdinand and Isabella when he signed treaties to cede territories for his safety. When the siege was intensified, Boabdil understood that he could not continue his resistance for long. He negotiated with the Catholic monarchs to avoid destruction. He sought good terms for his people, the preservation of their lives, property, and right to their religion. The terms of surrender were accepted by December 1491. On January 2, 1492, Boabdil surrendered the keys of Granada to Ferdinand and Isabella. It was a gesture of sorrow, a quiet surrender to almost 800 years of Muslim rule in Al-Andalus. The siege of Granada was not only a military victory but a transforming one. It was the culmination of the Reconquista, unifying Spain under Christian rule and heralding an era that would write a new script to alter history's course. For Granada's citizenry and their king, though, it signified the most somber defeat and the closing of the last window of an age that had once been the world's greatest, shimmering model of a civilization steeped in cultural and intellectual splendor. The last Nasrid king would be on his elbows wearing the royal habit before Ferdinand and Isabella, whom Boabdil presented himself to before the city, holding the keys of Granada as a gesture of surrender. He was seen with a loyal following, for he had come to realize that the Christians could not lose. It was more than the surrender of a city, it was the symbolic passing of an era. It was a moment when one of the most lively and long-enduring civilizations of the medieval world finally came to its end. Taking with victory the keys, as their conquest was the strengthening of their consolidation of Spain under a single state, and as a newly emerging world power in Europe, the very history of Al-Andalus, complex, intricate, multifaceted in character, was now boiled down to a single gesture replete with sorrow and triumph. As Boabdil and his retinue moved out of Granada, they stopped atop a hill above the city, as familiar today so much as a product of the style El Suspiro del Moro, or the Moor's Sigh. Legend has it that Boabdil turned his head to view the city for one last look, as his heart filled with emotions about losing his kingdom. His mother, Aixa, is said to have rebuked him on seeing his misery with the biting words. Even if the historicity of the quote is questionable, the story of El Suspiro del Moro captures the deep emotional toll of Granada's fall, not just on its ruler, but on the collective memory of those who had called it home. The hill remains a poignant landmark symbolizing the end of Muslim rule and the bittersweet legacy of Al-Andalus. It was not just a victory in battle, it was the end of a civilization that had greatly enriched art, science, philosophy, and culture. The fall of Granada was considered the loss of a golden age for Muslims across the world, while Europe looked to the dawning of its own cultural and territorial expansion. And so, Boabdil rode out of Granada, its gates closing behind him, a man of tragedy and resilience. Behind him, the city would live on as a testament to the splendor of Al-Andalus, though its people lived uncertain and often hard lives under the Christians. The last Moor's sigh rings through the ages, reminding us what was lost and what remains. The loss of Granada is a huge human tragedy for the Muslims and Jews of Iberia. The promise of coexistence, the codification in the terms of capitulation, was smashed within hours of Boabdil's surrender, as Ferdinand and Isabella initiated policies to consolidate Christian rule, often at the expense of Granada's diverse communities. The Catholic monarchs promised religious tolerance, allowing Muslims to continue practicing Islam and Jews to remain in their homes. However, this tolerance was short-lived. By the late 1490s, Muslims who decided to remain were coerced into conversion to Christianity and became Moriscos, a group under constant scrutiny and suspicion. The Jewish population too faced the infamous Alhambra decree in 1492, where all Jews were mandated to leave Spain if they refused to convert to Christianity. These ordinances ruptured families, destroyed towns and cities, and forced many individuals into exile. This, in essence, meant most converts were demeaned and submitted to savage inquisitorial inquisition for embracing heresies. Expulsion from Spain out of Muslim Jews deprived this country of fine scholars and brilliant poet-scientists, as well as skillful artists whose beauty, till now, decorated Al-Andalus. Liberals filled up by knowledge and rich in content from centuries gone by were ravished or seized and discontinued the separated continuum of that Spanish intellectual golden legacy of Islamic world. This had changed the social fabric of Granada forever. A city that once throve in the peaceful coexistence of faiths now lay there as a shadow of its former self. Streets once full of life and noise in commerce, prayer, and celebration stood silent in the face of persecution and fear. It was on this historical event that Ferdinand and Isabella, in the sacrosanct halls of Alhambra itself, made the Alhambra Decree or Edict of Expulsion. That was a clarion call for hundreds of thousands of Jews to get out of their motherland. It was a step towards a religiously uniform Spain. This edict had profound social and economic characteristics of the era, insofar as Jewish citizens had comprised such a large component of financial and intellectual activity in the kingdom. For the émigrés, this pilgrimage into exile was arduous in itself, and often enough they ended up in parts of the Ottoman Empire, North Africa, or other regions of Europe. Those who were left behind and converted never could rid themselves of suspicion and persecution, because in one land they knew they were always outsiders. The human cost of Granada was immeasurable. For the first time, forced exile and persecution would erase the coexistence, innovation, and cultural exchange that had characterized centuries. Meanwhile, in Spain, it represented unification and a new dawn, but this loss was going to echo across the Mediterranean and beyond. The fall of Granada did not symbolize only a kingdom that had come to an end, but the silencing of a way of life. From its architectural marvels to its literary treasures, Al-Andalus remains today as a testament to what was lost, reminding the world of the human cost of conquest. It closed the book on Muslim rule in Iberia, nearly 800 years of Al-Andalus after the fall of Granada in 1492. As the end of one era, it marked the start of another, for it was then that the world witnessed Spain rise as a global empire. Following the conquest of Granada, Ferdinand and Isabella united Spain under the Catholic banner and consolidated their rule, laying a foundation for further ambitious global endeavors. The fall of Granada in 1492 also ushered in a new year marked by Christopher Columbus's voyage to introduce the Age of Discovery. After they established and developed their newly acquired colonies, expanded their influence and impact on world history. But this global rise was built on the ashes of Al-Andalus, a stark reminder of how conquest often comes at a profound human and cultural cost. The memory of Al-Andalus lives on not only in the beautiful architecture of the Alhambra and the great Mosque of Cordoba, but also in the cultural echoes. Al-Andalus is refracted in Europe's rediscovery of ancient Greek texts in the areas of mathematics and astronomy, and in the intricate designs of Islamic art that inspire the creators worldwide. On the other hand, the loss of Granada manages to characterize collective memory in a much more intricate way. It shall be a triumph symbol for the Spanish national identity and a painful reminder of loss, displacement, and vulnerability of coexistence for others. Being such an inspiration and introspection to literature, music, and political discourse over the tales of Al-Andalus and its fall, it has determined the history of Granada as a global story. Indeed, the fall of Granada was a turn of points which resculptured Spain and the larger world of the Mediterranean, because the Muslim sovereignty at the Iberia Peninsula would end. Long after they fall, legacies in art and science are created due to human creativity and imagination. It continues to occupy an important place somewhere between yesteryears and the living testament to those historical influences shaping our perception of ourselves. It was on that sacred January day, when a silent change of keys took place, that the fortress of cultural prosperity and life yielded to the onward march of conquest and consolidation. What came to be known as the cultural heritage of Al-Andalus never died with Granada. It lived to influence the architecture of far-off lands, the tongue of scholars, and the spirits of innovation. But what of that world which Spain left behind on its march toward world power? The story of Al-Andalus is far from over. It continues to resonate and raise issues about identity, progress, and fragile balances in civilizations. What does the story of Al-Andalus have to say for us about our own time? What wisdom is there to draw from its ascension and then its fall? There are answers that lie in the shadows of history and are there to be found. The fall of Granada did not spell the end of the story. It was rather only the beginning of the questions. The story of Al-Andalus is a mirror that reflects the complexities of our world today. So here is a final question. What lessons can be learned from this extraordinary tale?